They saved my life. But what I found out later destroyed me. I never thought the worst day of my life would also be the beginning of something I couldn't explain. It started on a rainy night, the kind where everything feels heavier. The sky, the air, even your thoughts. I was driving back from work, exhausted and barely keeping my eyes open when it happened. One second I was on the road and the next everything went black. I woke up hours later in a hospital bed, bruised, broken, and confused. The doctors told me I was lucky, that if it weren't for a couple who pulled me from the wreck, I wouldn't have made it. Just like that, two complete strangers had saved my life. Their names were Imran and Aliyah, a quiet couple in their mid-30s who lived a few towns over. They visited me while I recovered, always kind, always caring. Imran even brought me tea the way I liked it, and Aliyah would ask if I was sleeping okay. Felt warm, safe, like I had known them forever. I started calling them family, because when someone saves your life, you feel like you owe them everything. But then things started to shift. Small things at first, questions they wouldn't answer, calls they ignored, and the way they seemed to always show up when I wasn't expecting them. I brushed it off, told myself I was just being paranoid. After all, they saved me. Why would I doubt them? Until one day, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that made my heart stop and my stomach turn. It changed everything I thought I knew about them, and about that night. That's when I realized, maybe they didn't save me out of kindness. Maybe they had a reason. One I was never meant to uncover. I couldn't sleep that night. The thing I found, a folded piece of paper tucked inside Imran's jacket, left on the hospital chair, was nothing dramatic at first glance. Just a name. Mine. Followed by an address. Not the one I currently lived at, but the place I grew up, a small flat in Karachi we left when I was 10. The writing wasn't theirs. It was typed clean formal. And the paper was old, yellowed at the edges. I remember staring at it for a long time, my hands cold, heartbeat louder than the beeping machines around me. I didn't ask them about it. I couldn't. Something told me I wouldn't like the answer. Instead I waited. Watched. I started noticing the way Aliyah avoided eye contact when I mentioned my parents, or how Imran changed the subject every time I brought up the accident. No one ever told me exactly where they found me, only that I was lucky. No photos of the crash. No police report shown. Just vague reassurances and careful smiles. When I was discharged, they insisted I stay with them until I was strong enough to be on my own. Felt like the right thing to do. I didn't want to be alone, and they felt familiar now, almost like family. But the house didn't feel right. It was too quiet. Their phones were always off when they were home. The basement door was always locked. I told myself not to be ungrateful, but deep down I knew something was off. One night while they were out, I walked into the study. It was the only room that felt lived in. Papers stacked high, a computer always on standby. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to understand who these people were. That's when I saw it. A photo. Tucked inside a drawer. An old picture of me, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting outside that same flat we left long ago. Smiling. A little dusty from play. But it was definitely me. And behind me, half blurred in the background, was a man I'd never seen before. But something about his eyes, the way he stood, arms crossed like he knew the camera was there, it made my skin crawl. Why did they have this photo? Who took it? And more importantly, why did it feel like I was being watched long before they ever saved me? I took the photo and slid it into my pocket before they got back. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about that man in the background. His face wasn't familiar, but something about him unsettled me. It wasn't just the way he stood, it was the way he looked at me in the picture, like he already knew who I was. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a coincidence. That photo wasn't something you just stumble upon unless you were looking for it. Unless you had been looking for me. Over the next few days I started paying more attention. Imran would leave early in the morning, say he was going to the shop or visiting someone, but never mentioned where exactly. Aliyah stayed home most of the time, keeping herself busy in the kitchen or doing laundry, always moving but never relaxed. One afternoon, I caught her staring out the window, talking quietly on the phone. Her voice was low, but I caught a few words. She said my name. Twice. Then said something about not telling him yet. When she noticed me nearby, she hung up immediately and smiled like nothing had happened. I started feeling trapped in the house. My phone barely had signal, and the Wi-Fi was always down. They said it was a problem with the area, but I wasn't sure anymore. I thought about asking someone for help, but who? I hadn't spoken to my family in years, not since my father passed away and things got messy. I thought maybe I could go to the police, but what would I even say? The people who saved my life might be hiding something. It sounded paranoid. Maybe it was. But maybe it wasn't. One evening, while pretending to be asleep on the couch, I overheard them talking in the next room. Their voices were tense. Imran said something like, "We can't keep this up. He's starting to notice." And Aliyah replied, "Just a little longer. We have to wait for the call." What call? Who were they waiting for? That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the accident. It wasn't about kindness or guilt. This was something else. Something planned. And I was at the center of it. But why? What did they want from me? Every answer I tried to piece together only led to more questions. And somewhere deep down, I knew whatever truth they were hiding wasn't going to be easy to hear. I started keeping notes, dates, conversations, little moments that felt off. It felt crazy, but it was the only thing keeping me grounded. I needed to see it all in one place, to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. That I wasn't just paranoid because of the trauma. The more I wrote, the more the pattern became clear. Everything since the night of the accident had followed a strange rhythm. Like I was part of something scripted. One evening I told Imran I wanted to step outside for a walk, just to clear my head. He smiled too easily and said he'd come with me. I told him I needed to be alone just for a few minutes. He paused, then handed me a jacket, the same one I found the note in weeks ago. I walked for a while, just long enough to put some distance between me and the house, then circled back around quietly through the alley behind their garden. I had to know what they were hiding. I found a small window near the basement. It was old, dusty, but not locked. I pushed it open and slipped inside. The air was cold, damp. A single bulb flickered near the stairs. It wasn't a storage room like I expected. It looked more like an office, papers, maps, photographs pinned to boards. And in the center, a metal file box. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were documents, old ones. Files with names, numbers, addresses. Some were redacted, others stamped with dates from years ago. Then I saw my name again. A file marked Subject 07. Inside was a scan of my birth certificate, school records, even a photo of my mother. Things I didn't even know existed anymore. But that wasn't what made my knees go weak, it was the medical report underneath. A report dated just 2 months before the accident. Blood type, history, and something else. A note at the bottom highlighted. Candidate cleared. Awaiting activation. I barely had time to process it before I heard footsteps creaking above me. I shoved the papers back and climbed out the way I came, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. I didn't stop running until I was 2 blocks away. I crouched behind a wall trying to breathe. Candidate. That word kept echoing in my head. For what? What did they mean by activation? Were they following me before the accident? Or did they cause it? That night I didn't go back to the house. I slept outside under a construction scaffold, with only my jacket and the file I managed to keep. My mind raced. I thought about that man in the photo again. What if he wasn't just a stranger? What if he was connected to all of this? I kept remembering Aliyah's words on the phone. Don't tell him yet. Tell me what? I knew I was close. Too close. Whatever this was, it wasn't about kindness or fate or some lucky rescue. It was deeper. Older. And I had just pulled back the curtain on something I was never meant to see. By morning my hands were numb and my throat dry, but I didn't move. I watched the street from where I was hidden, half expecting Imran or Aliyah to come searching. But they never showed. Instead, a black car pulled up near the corner of the block. It didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. Tinted windows, engine running, but no one got out. I stayed completely still, watching as a man in a gray coat finally stepped out and stood there. Not looking for anyone, just waiting like he knew I'd be nearby. He wasn't familiar, but he had the same presence as the man in the old photo. Calm. Sharp. Watching everything without saying a word. He lit a cigarette, took a single drag, and then looked directly at the scaffold where I was hiding, like he could see straight through the concrete. My chest locked. I didn't move. He didn't either. Then, after a minute that felt like an hour, he got back in the car and drove off without a word. I couldn't shake it. I knew then that Imran and Aliyah weren't acting alone. There was someone above them, someone watching, someone pulling strings. That file I found in the basement, it wasn't just about me. It was a part of something bigger, something organized. My mind kept going back to the word activation. Was I part of a program? A test? What had they done to me? Later that afternoon, I made my way to an old friend from university, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who once worked in a research lab connected to a private security firm. When I showed him the report I took from the basement, his face changed immediately. He asked me where I got it, who gave it to me. I told him the basics, leaving out their names. He looked me in the eye and said, "This isn't medical." "Not really. It's part of a behavioral tracking project. Military grade. Shut down years ago." Then he added something I didn't expect. "You weren't supposed to survive that crash." The words hit harder than anything else I'd heard. I stared at him, my throat dry. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then pointed at the report. "This code here, 07. It refers to a termination trial. It means you were being monitored, evaluated, and if flagged, removed. Quietly. Cleanly." I felt sick. So the accident wasn't random. It was staged. Designed to look like a fluke. But why did they save me? Why go through all this? What changed their plan? Before I could ask more, my friend's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then stood up suddenly. "You need to go. Now. They know you've seen this." I grabbed the paper and left through the back door, heart pounding in my chest. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my past, my accident, the people I trusted, it was all unraveling. I wasn't just running from Imran and Aliyah anymore. I was running from something much bigger. And I didn't know how much time I had left. I ran for hours, changing buses, walking through crowded markets, blending in wherever I could. I knew they were looking for me now, not just Imran and Aliyah, but the people behind them. The ones who knew about the program. About me. I had to find answers before they found me again. There was one place left I hadn't gone. One place I had avoided for years, my old home. The building hadn't changed much. Same cracked walls, same narrow stairwell that creaked under every step. Apartment 2B. I knocked, heart racing. An older woman opened the door. Our former neighbor, Miss Farah. She blinked in surprise, then softened when she saw my face. "You look just like your mother," she whispered. I asked her about the flat. She said no one lived there since we left, but she still had the spare key. I stepped inside, half expecting ghosts. Everything was dusty and quiet, but something inside me said to check the bedroom. That's where I found it. An old wooden box under the floorboard. Inside were letters, newspaper clippings, and a photo. My mother holding me as a baby. Next to her, the same man from the photo in Imran's drawer. But this time his face was clear. And he wasn't just anyone. He was my uncle. A man I was told died years ago. The back of the photo said, "For Rayhan when the time comes." Suddenly everything clicked. I wasn't chosen randomly. I was part of something my family had been connected to for decades. My uncle had worked for the same organization. But something went wrong. He tried to expose them and vanished. That's why they had been watching me. Why they tried to erase me. But Imran and Aliyah, they didn't follow through. They broke the rules. They saved me. Before I could process it, I heard footsteps in the hall. I grabbed the box and ran to the balcony, ready to jump if I had to. But it wasn't them. It was a different face, the man in the gray coat. Calm, expressionless. He didn't move closer, just stared at me for a moment. Then he said, "You were never meant to die. You were meant to replace him." I didn't understand, not at first. But then I realized what he meant. I wasn't the target. I was the backup plan. And someone else was still out there playing the original role. He didn't say another word. Just turned and walked away, disappearing into the hallway like he was never there. I stood frozen for a moment, trying to take it all in. Replace him. That sentence kept echoing in my mind. My uncle had tried to expose something dark, and they needed someone to take his place. Someone with the same blood. Someone who wouldn't ask questions. And for a while I didn't. My whole life had been watched, shaped, guided. From the places I lived to the people I met, maybe even the accident itself. It wasn't fate. It was design. I left the building quietly, carrying the box like it was the only piece of truth I had left. I didn't go back to my old life. I couldn't. Everything I thought was real had been pulled apart. But I wasn't angry anymore, not at Imran, not at Aliyah. I understood now. They had been part of the system too. Maybe they had orders, maybe they followed them for years. But something about me must have reminded them of who they used to be. That's why they saved me. Not because they had to, but because deep down they chose to. I left the city the next morning. Changed my name, my number, everything. I took only what mattered, the file, the photo, and the truth. I didn't know who the man in the gray coat really worked for, or how deep this thing went, but I knew I was no longer hiding. I wasn't a candidate anymore. I was a witness. Now I spend my days in quieter places. Places where no one knows who I am. I help people when I can. Listen more. Watch closely. I don't run from my past anymore, but I don't chase it either. Some stories are too twisted to untangle, and some truths never get spoken out loud. But I learned something through all of this, that sometimes the people who seem like strangers are the only ones who actually protect you. And the ones you trust without question might have been sent to keep you in line. I still don't know who I was meant to replace. But maybe I was never supposed to find out. Maybe surviving was the point all along. They saved my life. But what I found out later, it changed everything.